a gentleman showed up in front of me, and I could see him. I could see his hands. I could see he had a white robe on. He had a golden sash around his waist, and he had gold-colored sandals that laced up his calves. Well, he was a little bit different than the other people that I saw, because coming out of his face, there was so much light and so much energy. It was like little flashes of lightning. There was so much light I could not see his features. But he talked to me, and he said, "You must tell them there is no death." And then instantly, the very second he said that, I was back in the operating room.
John, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so grateful that you're here with me.
Hey, David, it's great. I always enjoy to share my stories. So thanks so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I've been waiting to speak with you about this. I'm really excited to hear about your near-death experience. So go ahead and jump in when you're ready.
Yeah. I'll give you the beginning of how this whole thing started. My dad, it really started with my dad. And my dad was in sales, and he won a sales contest. And part of what he won were these two mopeds, or these two, what we'd call scooters today. And we used to ride these things all over the neighborhood. Well, one day I was out riding and I had an accident, and I slammed into a tree. And the way that I landed, I tore the tendons off my right hand, and I needed to go in and have them reattached. Well, this took place in 1987, and I was only 21 years old, and I had never spent really much of any time in a hospital at all. So this was going to be my first surgery. So we go in, and when they started to give me the anesthesia, I had an allergic reaction, and it was so severe that it stopped my heart. And I was officially dead for 7 minutes. And that's how my whole story unfolded. And I want to give your audience a little bit of background to try to make this to kind of put it in perspective. When we hear about a typical near-death experience, a lot of times the person is in a hospital, or there's some kind of an accident and they die, and they find themselves floating above their bodies. They look down and they can see everything going on. And then they become aware of a tunnel, and they start to move down this tunnel. And at the end of the tunnel, there's a white light. But before they get to the tunnel, they're met by somebody. Either it's a family member who was passed, a grandparent, a parent, a friend, and that person tells them, it's not your time. You have to go back. So we have never known what happens when a person goes into that light until my experience. I always think of everybody's NDEs as being a piece of a jigsaw puzzle, and we're all trying to put this big puzzle together. And I think the most important piece about my experience is that I can tell people now I know what happens when you cross into the light. Well, what happens is, on the other side of that white light is the orientation center. And that's where my experience started. Somehow, and I don't know how they did this, but when I died, they skipped the tunnel, they skipped the white light, they skipped the person in the tunnel, they skipped all of it. And they put me on the other side of the light.
So I'm curious, how did you know that you were on the other side of that light?
Sure. When I got in that building, I open up, I'll go back. When I died, my eyes closed and I passed, the very next second I woke up and I was standing in the most beautiful building I had ever seen. It was made of marble, beautiful white marble. And as far down as I could see, this building was so long, I couldn't see the end of it. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, I had no idea the hospital was this big. And on the right-hand side of me were these beautiful, tall marble columns, just like you would see in Greece or Rome. And they were about 6 feet apart, again, all the way down as far as you could see, maybe 20 or 30 feet high. In the center of this building were these tables, square tables, and they had marble seats on each side, again, going all the way down. And each table had two people sitting there, again, all the way down as far as you could see. And to answer your question about how did I know I was on the other side or on the other side of that white light, on my left-hand side of this building were these, all I can describe them is they were tunnels. They looked like perfectly cut out doorways in solid marble, tunnels or doorways, and they were solid black. Well, right about that time, in my left ear, I heard, "My name is Alan. I'm your spirit guide."
Mm.
And I found out that all of us have spirit guides that are with us throughout our entire lives. And they help us plan our lifetimes. They help us plan why we're going to come here, what do we want to learn, what do we want to experience. And they're with us for our whole lives. So just for the benefit of our audience, my guide took me to all these different places on the other side. And as we were going to these different places, he told me what I was seeing. And he told me that where I was called the Orientation Center. And the reason it exists is when people come into a lifetime and they leave the other side or they leave home, our home is the other side. Earth is not our real home. We're just here temporarily. But the reason that they're there is most of us forget where we're from when we come into a lifetime. So when we finish that life and we come back, their job is to help us remember who we are and where we're from. Well, right about then, my guide told me to look up at the next tunnel. So I looked up, and there was a gentleman who was coming through this tunnel. He was an elderly man, maybe 80 or 90, and he had lived a long life on Earth. And he had his right hand over his left chest, like he had some kind of pain. And my guide said he just passed from a heart attack. That's when I realized that these tunnels, somehow these tunnels connect Earth with the other side. And we all pass through these tunnels. And when you pass into the light, you end up in orientation. So let me back up a little bit. At each one of these tables, all the way down, were two people. And my guide said these are orientation counselors. On the other side, all of us have things that we love to do. It's kind of like what we are gifted, what God gave us at creation. And we all tend to do what we love. So anything that you love to do here on Earth, you can also do on the other side. But you don't do things over there for money like you do here. Because here, everybody's got bills to pay. You've got to pay your rent, or you've got utilities. And on the other side, we don't have that.
What a dream, not to have to pay bills.
Absolutely. Isn't it, though?
Yeah, it is. And John, were you physical? Were you like solid? Could you see your body? Did you have a body on the other side, or was it all energy? Because you're describing a place that it seems kind of like an Earth, like another planet, like another like physical planet. Is that what it was like?
Yeah. In fact, it never occurred to me to look down, because during this whole process, I didn't know that I died. I only knew that I died after I came back. But the people that I saw, everybody, these counselors, this gentleman who was coming through the tunnel, and everybody else I saw during this experience, everyone looks just like we do. I've heard from many people, they say that on the other side, we appear as, energy or light or little orbs. But that's not what I saw. Everybody has form, and the bodies that we have there, they're just like ours, but they're perfect. The bodies over there don't get sick, they don't age, they don't break down. That only happens here on earth. And I always think about the passage in the Bible in Genesis where it says, we are made in the image and likeness of God. So the bodies that we have here on earth are poor replicas of what they are on the other side. Over there, they're absolutely perfect. And what's interesting too is, and I don't know why this is, but on the other side, we're all in our 30s. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because Jesus died at 33, or I don't know what the reasoning is, but everybody is young over there. And here's something that was really interesting. So the woman, the counselor that was closest to him, she stood up and she walked over to him and she took his hands in hers and she walked him back to the table and they sat down and she held his hands the entire time. Well, I was too far away, so I couldn't hear what she was telling him, but I could see her talking to him. And my guide was telling me that what the orientation counselors do is they simply remind them that they just finished a life on earth. Now they're back on the other side and they're going to continue where they left off. And it's just a way to help people remember or to get out of that confusion of what just happened. You just finished your life. And the thing that's so interesting is the other side, they don't have time like we do. So when you finish a lifetime, like this gentleman did, being in his 80s or 90s, it seems like a long time to us when we're here. But when you finally pass and your lifetime is finished, it's almost like no time has passed when you're back on the other side. It's like, oh, I just left. So their job as orientation counselors is just simply to remind people where they're from. So my guide said, watch him. So as I was watching her talk to him, all of a sudden, he started to change. He changed from a man and is an elderly gentleman in his 80s or 90s into a young guy again in his early 30s. And that's how we all appear on the other side. And that's how I realized that, okay, this part of this man's orientation is over. Now he remembers where he's from. He's got his memory back. Well, he stood up and he walked off to the right. And he walked down between the columns and he walked down 3 steps into what I call the gardens. I don't know if the other side calls it that. That's just what I called it from what I saw. And it was the most beautiful gardens you've ever seen. The grass it looked alive, like emerald green, and it was flowers and plants and trees, and it looked like English gardens, absolutely perfectly manicured and more beautiful than anything I've ever seen. Well, what this was is every time somebody comes back from an Earth lifetime, they go through the tunnel, they go through the light, they meet somebody in orientation, and they walk up to the right, and they walk into the gardens to have what's called a reunion. And everybody that person knew in his or her lifetime that is past is there waiting for them. And not only is it people, but it's also all of your animals, because our animals also transition just like we do. So all these, there must have been hundreds of people that were there. They were applauding, clapping, hugging this guy and telling him what a great job he did. And I found out, David, that the reason that this part of the experience is so important is because coming to Earth, it's a really big deal when somebody wants to have a lifetime here. And the reason is because it's so hard. There is no other planet that has the negativity and the hardship and the trials that we have here on Earth. And there are many, many souls who won't come here for that reason. So when someone is brave enough to come here, they finish their life and they go back to the other side, there's a really big celebration. And that's why all those people were there. And that's called a reunion.
That's incredible, John. And now I'm wondering, if we do live lives on other planets as well, because Yes, Earth is very dense. It's very challenging, very hard. I'm curious if certain people have different experiences in the afterlife because maybe there are different afterlives. Do you think that it's possible that maybe this is like where a section of us go and maybe a section of us go somewhere else? Or do you think that we're all funneled into this one place?
That is something that I have thought a lot about, because something I'll mention in just a little bit is, just like you said a moment ago, Earth is not the only planet. There are virtually billions of other worlds in the universe that we can have lifetimes on. And what I don't know is if every one of those planets has their own other side, or does everyone get funneled back to this other side? That I don't know. And I don't think there was enough time for my guide to really show me or tell me any part about that, because my experience only lasted 7 minutes. But the thing that was so weird is that it felt to me like I was on the other side for an hour or two, because all of the things that they were showing me. So if I could go back, that is one of the questions I would ask is, are there other sides, or do we all get funneled into the same place? And do every one of these other sides have these tunnels that lead from that planet to the other side? Or do these tunnels, because I had no concept of how long these tunnels were. Did they connect all the different planets in the universe? Were they that big? And I don't know. All they showed me was that that's how we get back from a planet to the other side. But that's a great
Wow.
question. That is just a really good question. And I think if I had known that I had died, that this is what happens when you die, I think I would have asked so many questions. I just didn't know. I didn't know that I had died.
What point did you realize, whoa, I'm dead.
I,
This is not normal. I mean, because I can imagine seeing an 80-year-old transform into a 30-year-old. You're probably like, what is going on right now?
yeah, yeah. I didn't even think about that until I got back in the operating room. I was so enthralled with what I was seeing. I was just going along with it, like, wow, this is happening, that's happening. Where am I? And I was just going along with all of it because my guide was telling me everything. And then there was no there. He didn't say, "Do you have any questions? Let me tell you what's going on. You just died." And I think there just wasn't enough time. So they were taking me to all these different places. And the thing that's so interesting to me is people have asked me, did you come back with any kind of a gift? You'll hear a lot of
Mm.
people's stories and they say, oh, I'm psychic. I can talk to the other side. I can talk to people who have passed over. And I don't have anything like that. The only thing I think that they gave me was the ability to remember every single detail. Because this happened to me when I was 21, back in 1987. But I remember every single detail like it happened yesterday, because that's what they wanted me to tell people. They wanted me to share this story with anybody who would listen, because it wasn't for me. They gave it to me to simply to share it.
We forget. We enter this veil of forgetfulness when we enter these bodies to have this experience so we can remember who we really are, right?
Yeah.
Um, but then people like you have the experience to come back and tell us who we really are. And hey, look, this is what happens. It kind of seems like a hack. Like, if we're supposed to forget, why do some people remember? And why do some people have these experiences where they do remember and come back to share it with the rest of us if we are supposed to forget? I'm curious.
That's a really good question. And here's what I can tell you that I know. There are so many people from my own experience, so many people who think that they're failures in life because they haven't achieved something. They haven't become everything their parents told them they should be, that they haven't accomplished their dreams, they haven't accomplished their goals, they haven't found the love of their life, they didn't do this, they didn't have a family, or whatever it may be. And the reason is that not everybody is going to experience that. because you're not supposed to. If you wanted to have a perfect life, you would never have left the other side, because the other side is perfect. There's no war, there's no hunger, there's no homelessness, there's no poverty, there's no disease. It's a perfect world. But we don't always necessarily learn when things are perfect. On the other side, you can still learn. There are all kinds of ways to learn. But the reason that we come into a lifetime is because we have to go through things here. You have to endure a lot of hardships, a lot of pain, a lot of heartache. And everybody has their Mount Everest here. And that's by design. Nobody comes here because they want to have an easy life. They want to learn and experience. And that's something that's interesting that I try to tell people is when they're on the other side and you're planning a lifetime, it only feels like you're going to be gone for 2 or 3 months because time is different for them. So they think, I'm going to take this on. I'm going to have this relationship. I'm going to go through this experience. I'm going to have this happen. And to them, it's like, okay, I'll be able to make it through okay. But when you actually get here and you're living life day to day, it can be really challenging and really hard. And one of my personal things that I want to do is reach people who are considering suicide, to let people know that everybody on the other side is rooting for you. Don't give up. There's a reason for your life. Everybody has a reason for being here. Everybody comes in for a reason. And nobody wants to see them cut their lives short. And even if they do, nothing bad happens to them when they cross over. They take them to healing centers where they're loved and given love and compassion and counseling. And there is no such thing as judgment. The whole idea of hell doesn't exist. God didn't create a hell. There are lower levels on the other side where lower level souls go. But God, who absolutely loves and cherishes us, never created a hell. That was a man-made invention. That was a religion invention.
So I'm wondering, there are lower levels, you said, on the other side where lower levels souls go. Are you referring to like the Hitlers of the world? What happens to them?
Here's how I understand it. After, I'll kind of explain this as I'll go. After the people have the reunion, my guide took me to another building. He took me to the outside of everything he showed me first, and then he took me to the inside. And I was only in a small area of the other side. It's like a planet, and they took me to just this one area. But the area that I was in, it felt like being on a college campus where you have your science building is here, your English building is over here, you've got your history building here. It felt like that's where I was. And all these different buildings, they had the architecture of Greek or Rome. And this one, and the buildings, by the way, were absolutely gigantic. We have nothing like them here on Earth. They were so large. So the building he took me to it was a rectangular building, and there were columns all around this whole building, white marble columns. So he took me to the inside, and the inside, there were hundreds of rooms here, but the one he took me to was a round room, and it looked like a theater, but it was round instead of rectangle. And on the top of this ceiling of this round room, there were video screens, like movie screens, all along in a circle around my head. There must have been 15 or 20 of these. And my guide said, everybody goes through a life review. And all of a sudden, every one of these screens lit up like somebody had flipped the switch for a movie. Well, the movies that were playing were my life. One screen had me as a little toddler. A next screen had me as an adolescent. The next screen had me entering kindergarten. And every single one of these screens had a different aspect of my life playing. And the thing that's so interesting is the idea for the life review is to see how you did, because all of us have goals for coming into a lifetime. It's almost like what you do at the beginning of a new year. A lot of people have New Year's resolutions. That's kind of what it's like. You plan your lifetime ahead of time. And the life review is to see how did you do. Well, to answer your question earlier about what happens to people who hurt others, who maliciously, intentionally hurt people, from what I was told, nobody escapes the life review. Nobody. Not Hitler, not Mussolini. Nobody escapes the life review. And what makes the life review so poignant is that not only do you see your life, but you see how your life impacted others. In other words, you feel how you made people feel. If you hurt others, if you victimized others, you will feel what those people felt in that life review. And there's a reason for that. The first one is to see if you accomplished what you wanted to accomplish. And the second one is to learn. God has given everybody unlimited chances to learn and to grow and to develop. And if you had a lifetime of hurting other people, you have to face that and you have to feel what you've done. And that is probably the most eye-opening, eye-awakening experience any soul will ever go through.
I can only imagine that in and of
Yeah.
itself is punishment enough to
Yeah.
feel what you've done to somebody else and to experience that, in your body and every cell of your body, just knowing like, whoa, look what I did.
Absolutely. Yep.
That
Absolutely.
cha- that I would imagine causes instant transformation. I would
I
hope
think so
so.
too. I would hope so too. Yep. If that doesn't, I don't know what else would.
Right.
So
Maybe
that's
another
that's
lifetime.
yeah, it could be. It could be that if you don't learn, maybe you have to come back and to experience what those people experienced that you inflicted on them. Because nobody gets away with anything. God knows everything. And somehow, and I can't explain how this works, but everything gets recorded. Like when I was in that room and they were showing me all of my lives during that time period, somehow that's recorded. And it has to be God, because I have no other idea how that happens. But nobody gets away with anything. It's all God knows all of that. And everybody will have to face what they've done. So
Wow.
that was just a really amazing part. And the next one he took me to was hard for me to accept at first because I was raised Catholic and my dad was really Catholic. We would go to church 3 times a week and then on Sundays. So I grew up in the church and the only thing that I knew was what I was told. So my guide took me to another building. It was a huge building again with columns out front. And he took me into one of the rooms. But this room was different. It looked like what we would call a normal movie theater. It was long and it had a screen at the front of the room. And my guide said to me, I'm going to show you past lifetimes. Well, to me, that was absolutely ridiculous because Catholicism doesn't teach that you have past lifetimes. But during my experience, we are eternal. We have always been. We always will be. And the opportunity to have multiple lifetimes is totally up to the individual soul. Nobody ever has just one life unless they want to. Because on the other side, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but on the other side, you still learn. There are still all kinds of ways to learn and to grow. But when you come into a lifetime, it's almost like somebody telling you what it's like to ride a bike on the other side. They can tell you this is what it feels like, this is what you do, but you don't know what it's like until you come into a lifetime and actually ride a bike. And that's why we come into lives. Well,
Mm.
past lifetimes are real because we love to learn. I think one of the reasons is that when God created all of us, he gave us all the desire to like to learn new things, to learn, and learning never ends. And so he showed me lifetimes. And the first one he showed me, the movie screen turned on, and I was a monk. I had a shaved head, I had a red gown on, and I was in a monastery. And my job in that life was to teach kids about the monastic life. And even though I didn't look like I do now, because we all have different DNA, different genetics in every lifetime, you know who it is. You just know that it's you. So that one disappeared. The next one he showed me was a lifetime as a shoe peddler. I had a wheelbarrow, and my job in that life was to fix people's shoes. And I had all these shoes stacked up in the wheelbarrow, and I was wheeling this wheelbarrow down to different people to drop off their shoes. And it was interesting because in these lifetimes, I knew where these lifetimes had occurred. The first one is the monk. That was somewhere in Southeast Asia. The life as the shoe repair person, I was in somewhere in Eastern Europe. In the third life he showed me, I was in a wooden boat, and I had nets, and I was on a lake, and I was throwing these nets into the water to catch fish. And my job in that life was to help feed the village by fish. And just the revelation that we have past lifetimes was something that was hard for me to understand. But then after the experience, I thought, you know what? We really do live eternally. We don't ever die. Of course we can have more than one life.
Was it familiar to you when you were watching this? Were you like, oh, I remember this? Or was it like watching a movie for the first time and just being like, oh, that's interesting? How did it feel in your body when you were watching this?
When I was on the other side, I couldn't explain it because I didn't know where I was at the time, but it felt like home. Where I was, it just felt like my whole life. This is what I've been missing. This is that gut feeling that I've been missing. This is home. When I was watching those lifetimes, it wasn't like I had all my memory back again. It didn't happen that quickly. But on the other side, when you're there, not only are you from your current life, but you have all of your lifetime memories back with you. You become the totality of everything that you have been. Whereas only on Earth, you just have your Earth experiences. There are some people I have read about that some people come back or come into a life and they have some of their memories of other lifetimes. But for the most part, most of us don't remember our previous lifetimes. And I think if we did, we'd probably lose our minds. But when I was watching those lives, I just was kind of seeing it as it was happening, because I wasn't totally incorporated on the other side yet.
So my question to you is, okay, so you're John, and when you go to the other side, you're still John because you're kind of in this orientation process trying to understand where you're at. But then I'm guessing we go deeper and further into it. If we've lived thousands and thousands of lives, who knows how many lives we've lived, right?
Yeah.
And we've had thousands, maybe millions of brothers and mothers and fathers and lovers. Like, who do we reunite with on the other side? You know, who are we after living all those lives? What body do we go into? Who are we, and who's there waiting for us? Like, that blows my mind to even think about, because how many sets of parents do we have? You know, and I can imagine when you're there, you're like, you don't want to come back to this world. And it's like, well, my family and loved ones are in this world waiting for me. Like, they would be devastated if something happened to me, right? And then, like, the thought of being taken away from my family, or my family taken away from me, is just like so sad and devastating. But then we get over there and it's like, oh, they'll be fine. I'm here. Like, this place is magical, and like, I don't want to leave. They'll be okay. They'll get it later. They'll understand. It's mind blowing to me, because then, like, when you go to the other side, are you seeing like parents from other lives that you're like, oh, hey, what's up? You know, I love you so much. it just seems like I would get lost in the love and the experience. Like, how do I know who I am? And I don't know. It's a lot for me to like understand. Maybe I don't know. What
No,
are your
you're right.
thoughts on
You're
all of
right.
that?
It's to try to think of that in the human mind. It is overwhelming. But here's how I understand it. Everybody that well, let me back up. For whatever you want to appear as on the other side, that's how you appear. And from what I understand, people can appear as their most favorite lifetime, or they appear as God created them in the beginning. But you can appear in any form you want to take on. Like that gentleman that I saw in the beginning in the orientation center when he had crossed over. He was an elderly gentleman, and he became in his 30s when he remembered where he was from. He took on the appearance of how he most wanted to be viewed. Everybody, and I'll tell you this in just a second, but everybody has their own look to them. They look just like we do. Some people are taller, some people are shorter, some people have brunette hair, some people have blonde, and every ethnicity, every race was represented there. Everybody has their own appearance. However they want to appear, that's how they appear to others. And we have, like just like you mentioned, multiple relationships when we come into a lifetime. Well, when you see somebody that was your parent, let's say you had a lifetime in ancient Greece, and you come across a soul that was your mom in that lifetime, she's not going to look like she did in that life. She's going to look like she normally appears on the other side in her 30s, just like we all do, because we're all souls of God, and that's how He created us. But there's and I don't know how it works, but we all know soul recognition. You just know who these people are. You know that that person was your child in that lifetime. This person was your father. This person was your best friend in that life. You just know. And they're always with you. You never have to, the only time you leave them is when you come into a lifetime. But we're always all together on the other side.
That makes so much sense. And I've gotten that. Like I've had experiences myself where you just know. There's a gnosis there. It's like like a fingerprint, you
Yeah.
know? And so you know what that soul is, who they are. That makes sense. Thank you for putting words to that, because that
Yeah.
I was getting lost in
Absolutely.
that thought.
Yeah. As you can, there's so much to take in, and we only have our human brains to try to understand all this. So that was the part about the past lives. This next part was another really favorite part of mine. The next building he took me to was round. It wasn't rectangle. This was a huge round building, and it had, again, marble columns all around the circle, and there was a big dome on it. And my guide told me that this is the building that we go to when we plan a lifetime. And I don't know, he didn't tell me why we go there, but this is where we go. So he takes me in and he brings me up to a table, a beautiful white marble table. And there was a scroll on this table. And what it looked like, have you ever seen old Egyptian papyrus? It looked kind of
Yeah.
like that. And it was
Oh
rolled
yeah.
up. It was rolled up and it had a blue ribbon around it. So I walk in and I pick up the scroll and I take the ribbon off and I open up the scroll on this table, and there was black writing all through the scroll, and it looked like calligraphy. It looked like the kind of writing that you take an ink pen, dip it in the inkwell, and write it out. It looked like that, calligraphy. Well, my guide told me that all of our lifetimes are written out ahead of time. All of our goals, what country we're going to live in, who our parents are going to be, what language are we going to learn, are we going to go to a university, what kind of career are we going to have. And the whole idea is to really pin down what it is you want to achieve by coming into a lifetime. all the experiences, what do you hope to accomplish? And we write everything down. And it's almost like what we do when we have a New Year's resolution. We have all these goals. Well, when I went to try to read it, because I wanted to see what I had written, all of a sudden the scroll folded up and I wasn't allowed to read it. And the
Not
reason,
yet.
yeah, not yet. Yeah. And the reason was because I wasn't allowed to see the different challenges that I had put in for myself, because then maybe I wouldn't face them. Maybe I wouldn't go through that hardship, because there's a reason why we go through everything.
Before I forget to ask, I'm curious. We have free will, but we have these bullet points that we want to tackle while we're here in our physical bodies, right?
Yes.
So how do we stay on track? How do we even do the things that we came to do? How do we know to do those things? You know,
Yeah.
how do we know what challenges are going to be, we're going to face in life? How do we know who we're going to meet, who we're going to fall in love with, who's going to break our heart, whose heart we're going to break, you know, what accident we're going to get in, like, because we also have free will. So it seems really hard or almost impossible to do the things that are on this list that we've made before coming into this life because of free will.
Yes.
That really confuses me.
It does me too. I still get confused about that, but you're right about free will. God loved us so much at creation that he gave all of us free will. And some choose the light path and others choose a dark path. And that's something that God knew, that by giving people free will, they can choose a different path that they want to go on. But to answer the other question about how do we know we're going to stay on track? Firstly, that's what your guide does. Your guide helps you with that, to stay on track. And secondly, the life chart is really detailed. It's so detailed that you will meet certain people. You meet ahead of time with people. Hey, I'm going to meet you and I'm going to meet up with you when I'm 20 in that lifetime. We're going to have a short relationship. This is what you hope to learn by going through that. Because the reason you go through difficult times is it's the hard times that teach us the most. It's the rough time. Like if you think back on your life, you think everything that you've been through, you've become so much more by having gone through that. And
Absolutely.
that's why we do it. But the chart is really detailed. But again, you have free will. You can change things in your life chart. If you decide that, like if you had the idea that you want to go live in Italy for a year, that is probably something that you charted, because that would be a big part of your life. And that would be something that's in your psyche, that's something you want to accomplish. And all of those are actually in your mind when you come into a lifetime. That's why you have some people who they've always wanted to be a doctor, or some people have always wanted to be a police officer, or they've always wanted to be a chef. That comes from somewhere, and that comes from the other side. So we take some part of that planning with us when we come in, because it's such an ingrained part of us. And if you look back at your life and you look at the different events of your life, a lot of it seems to be structured. Like this happened, then as a result of that, then this happened, and that's all part of it. That's all part of why we're here. Nobody is here by accident. Everybody has a chart. And right about then, I looked off to my right, and there was this huge, gigantic wall. It had to have been blocks or miles long. And what it was full of charts. Every single person that was in a lifetime at that time had a chart on this wall. And my guide just took out my chart and left it on the table for me to see it, because he wanted me to tell people that your life isn't an accident. There's a reason for everything. Even though you may not know what it is at this time, you planned it ahead of time, and there's always a much bigger reason than you know. And I just thought it was amazing to see all these charts here. Well, right about then, I looked off to my left, and there was this huge, sprawling window outside this building, and there was a walkway. And this is the first time where I saw people. And this is where I realized they look just like we do. It was so busy. Wherever they took me on the other side, it was just full of activity. And this walkway looked like if you went to a big city at lunchtime and everyone left the office to go to lunch and they're all walking down the street and everything. That's what this looked like. People looked just like we do. Everybody had different hairstyles. Some people were taller, some were shorter. A lot of people wear tunics or gowns over there, kind of like what you'd think people in Greece or Rome would wear. And the reason is because they're the most comfortable.
Yeah, I was literally going to say that's so comfy. I
Yeah,
get it.
but there are people that wear jeans and t-shirts and anything they want. And another thing that was so cool is this is when I realized that the other side has all of nature. Everything that you love, like going to the beach or hiking in the mountains, all of nature is on the other side also. It's almost like the other side is Earth, but only perfected. No war, no pollution, no corruption, no disease. And when I looked on the other side of this walkway, there was a lake. And it was the most beautiful lake that I have ever seen. I've never seen anything here on Earth that comes close to what this lake looked like. It was a beautiful round lake, and it was so still, it looked like glass. And the water was so clear, I could see the bottom of the lake. And all around the circumference of this lake were weeping willow trees. And they're the kind of trees that they fold over, and they had all their leaves sitting in the lake. It was absolutely beautiful.
Whoa.
It was
Could
just
you
the
see
most.
fish
No, I didn't
or
see anything.
animals?
No, no, I didn't see animals. I knew they were there, but I just
Yeah.
didn't see any. Yeah, I didn't see
Wow.
any. And here's
Could you
something
see
else.
like the trees did you feel like the trees and the grass was like alive and breathing?
Yes, everything over there. And I first realized this when I was in the orientation center, and that guy walked off down to the gardens. That's when I realized that this this grass, we have nothing like that here on Earth. It was so green, it was so emerald perfect, it seemed to be alive somehow. And all of nature over there seems to be alive like that. It was just extraordinary. Well,
Wow.
my guide took me to another place inside this round dome building, and this was something I thought was really neat. And at the time, I had never heard this term before, but you've probably heard the term soulmates.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was going to be
Yeah,
another question. What are
yeah,
soulmates? Do we travel with like a pod of souls from
yeah,
lifetime to
yeah.
lifetime?
Soulmates are real. And he took me to an area of this building where it was a huge, gigantic library, and all the books looked the same. They looked like Britannica or Encyclopedia Britannicas. They were kind of maroon, kind of purplish, and they were all along these lines in this library on these bookshelves. Well, every single book had gold lettering on it, but the gold lettering didn't go across. The lettering went down from top to bottom, and every one was a name. And he took me to mine, and my book said Nina, Nina. And what that was is Nina is my soulmate. And we all have soulmates on the other side. God created us with a perfect match, a perfect mate that you'll have with you for eternity. The only thing I don't know is if the soulmate comes into a lifetime with you. That I don't know.
So you don't know if
I
Nina is in your life right now.
Correct. Exactly. I don't know
And
if
Nina could end up being a male or a female, depending on how they incarnate in your life.
yes, yes. Exactly.
That's wild.
And I don't know if the soulmate comes into a lifetime with you, because if they did, you would have a perfect mate. You would never have anything to work through. And relationships, when you come into a lifetime on earth, relationships are the things that teach you the most. So if you had a perfect mate, you may not learn as much as you could learn. And that's something that I like to tell people, because people think that if they haven't found their perfect mate, if they haven't found their soulmate in this life, there must be something wrong with them. But there are many, many people who choose not to have their soulmate come with them solely for the purpose of experiencing and learning. Because
Mm.
relationships is such a huge part of life on earth. That's how we learn.
It is, absolutely.
I want to encourage people that don't give up. If you haven't found your mate, whether it's a female or a male or whoever you're attracted to, if you haven't found your perfect mate, that's okay. Your perfect mate is on the other side. And that's what matters, because that's eternity. Here on earth, it's only a short, short amount of time. And you're here to learn and to experience and to grow. And just the fact that you're here going through it, you've already won the battle. So don't feel bad if you haven't found the right person. It doesn't, it's so immaterial, because the other person is there for you just on the other side.
That's beautiful. Do we travel together with certain souls? Do we reincarnate with the same souls over and over again? Do you know anything about that?
I don't know. I have heard that there are, what's the term that I've heard is a family of souls, or um, I know what you're thinking of. People that come back the same time with each other. I don't know, because I would think that if you have the same person that comes back with you in each lifetime, you may not learn that much from them. And you learn more by having more people in your experience. Oh, they call them soul groups. I've heard that
Soul
term.
groups.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
because
heard.
like, what if you have an agreement with someone and be like, okay, I'm going to be the villain in your life this time. And that's how you learn from them, right? Or I'm going to be your best friend, or I'm going to be your best friend that betrays you. I feel like maybe we can have these agreements with people.
I have heard that before, but I don't have any experience with that. My guide didn't tell me anything about that. I don't see the why that couldn't be true.
Mm,
I just don't know.
yeah, we're just trying to make sense of this. But yeah,
Exactly. Yep, exactly. So that was the building with the big dome on top. This next place, I think, is, out of all the places my guide took me to, I think this is my most favorite. Again, he took me to the outside, and it looked like a huge stadium building, like where you have sports, and just enormous. So he takes me to the inside, and the inside is thousands and thousands of seats. And what it was, I was in a planetarium. Did you ever go to a planetarium as a kid on field trips?
I
Yeah,
still do. The Griffith Park Observatory here in Los Angeles, they have the planetarium there, and it's so cool.
yeah. See, they're awesome. I remember going to one when I was a kid for a field trip. Well,
Yeah.
that's where I was. I was in this enormous, gigantic um, planetarium, and my guide was there with me. And I don't know why I didn't look back, but there was a gentleman behind me, and his job on the other side was to run the planetarium. He loved everything about astronomy. He loved galaxies, the universe, and he loved to run the planetarium. He was kind of like the other side's expert about this part of the other side, life on the other side. And he said to me, "Let's begin." And all of a sudden, all the lights went off. It was pitch black. And I sat down. And he said to me, "When you look at the stars, this is what you see." And what he was referring to is everybody on Earth at that time, at their level of development and knowledge, this is what they see when they look at the stars. And all of a sudden, on the ceiling, he showed me Earth, then our sun, then he proceeded to show me our planets. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Venus, all of our planets in our solar system. And then they disappeared. And then he said, when we look at the stars, this is what we see. And he was referring to all the people on the other side with their level of knowledge and development. This is what they see. And all of a sudden, planet after planet after planet started showing up. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands, and millions of planets. And he said to me, there is far more life in the universe than you can possibly know. And my guide took me here for two reasons. The first one was to show me that life is not the only inhabited planet. And number two was to tell me that there are many, many other worlds that you can have lifetimes on. Earth is not the only one. So if you don't want to come to Earth because it's so hard here, there are multiple millions of other worlds that we can have lifetimes on. And something I like to share with people, just to give people an idea of how large the universe really is. When I was in college, I took an astronomy class because I grew up with the original Star Trek, watching Captain Kirk, and I loved science fiction. Well, I had to drop the class because I could not understand the math. And they were trying to explain how they calculate the distance from one planet to another. And there was an astronomer that I read about, and she was trying to explain to the layperson how large a galaxy really is. And she was given an example of our galaxy, the Milky Way. And she said that if we had a ship that could travel at the speed of light, which is what we know to be the fastest speed, which is 186,000 miles per second. And we had a ship, if you put that ship on the other end of our galaxy, and that ship flew to the other end of our galaxy, it's such a vast distance, it would take 99,000 years just to get from one end of the Milky Way to the other.
Wow.
And they estimate that there are over 100 billion planets just in the Milky Way galaxy. And I was reading something. I'm such a nerd. I was on NASA's website, and I was reading that as of 2023, NASA has found and categorized 285,000 separate galaxies. And they think that there are billions and billions of galaxies in the universe.
That's mind-blowing.
It is. You can't even wrap your head around it. So to imagine you can have lifetimes in all these different worlds, it just is, it's just, you can't even imagine it. It's just unbelievable.
It seems infinite.
Yeah. And I think that was my favorite part of my near-death experience was the planetarium.
You were Catholic when you were experiencing, you were 21 years old, right? And you were a Catholic. At any point were you like, where's Jesus?
No, I'll tell you that at the end though. At the time, I didn't know that I had died.
That's right. You keep saying that. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. If I had known that I died, I think I would have asked so many questions, so many things, and something happened. I'll tell you in a minute too that I wish I had known, because I could have asked this person something. But the next place he took me to was by far the largest building. And again, it was marble, and it was long, huge, long, like so long I couldn't see the end of it. But this one didn't have any columns. The only columns it had were in the front. And it looked like what our Supreme Court building looks like. It's got the triangle roof and the columns out front and all the stairs leading up to the top. So we go on the inside, and I immediately realize it's a library. And there are miles of wooden bookshelves, maybe 20 or 30 feet high, full of books. And there are people everywhere. Some people are sitting, studying. Some people are visiting. Some people are looking for books. And everything my guide explained that everything that you want to learn is in this library. Everything about history or English or science, everything is there. Well, he took me to an area on the left-hand side of this building, and there are what we would call today as study rooms. They were about the size of somebody's average living room or an average bedroom. And he takes me to this room, and he takes me to one where there's a woman, and she has her back to me, and she has jet black hair about down to her waist, and she was wearing kind of a purplish kind of tunic or a gown. And I couldn't see her face because her back was to me, and she was watching what we would call today as a flat screen TV mounted on the wall. Well, this was extraordinary to me because when I had my experience, it was 1987. And we didn't have flat screen TVs back then. We had these huge, bulky televisions. So it was just amazing to see that this screen was mounted on a wall. It was probably like a 50 or 60-inch screen. It was a big screen. And my guide said, "Look what she is watching." So I got closer, and I thought that she was watching a movie because it was a battle that it was taking place, and it was Native American Plains tribes on horseback versus the United States cavalry on horseback. And I thought she was watching a movie. Well, my guide said she is watching history. I thought, how is that possible? Because back then, we didn't have video cameras. I don't even think we had cameras yet. And my guide said everything gets recorded.
Like your life review.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And
Yeah.
what this girl was doing is she was interested in learning about that particular era or that particular battle that had happened 200 years ago on Earth. So she could go into this room in the library and she could watch something that happened in the past in real time. She could actually see what happened. And I'm a total history buff. That just lit me up because I cannot wait to get back because I want to go to one of those rooms and I want to watch what it was like for those guys in World War II on D-Day when they invaded France. I want to watch that. And it was so amazing to see that you can watch history. Remember how we talked earlier about the other side you can still learn?
Yep.
That's one of the ways you can learn. If you didn't have a lifetime in a particular era on Earth or on any other planet, and you want to learn about that history, you can go to these rooms and you can watch what really happened. So I thought that was absolutely extraordinary. And that was the library. Well, the next thing he took me to was a huge castle, just like you would see in England or in France. Beautiful, perfect castle, just like it was made on Earth. And I was told that everything on Earth was first on the other side. So what he was doing is he wanted to tell me that if you wanted to learn about a particular time in Earth's history that you may not have had a lifetime on, you can come to these areas on the other side and you can see the buildings that these people lived in. So the castle was just this huge castle. And we walked inside, and the first thing I noticed was that there was this red sprawling carpet all throughout this castle. And on the left-hand side and the right-hand side were these huge walls. And on the walls were life-size paintings. And what they were is they were life-size paintings of the people that had lived in that castle during that time period. So if you wanted to look and see what King George looked like or Queen Elizabeth, you could go to this castle, you could look at her painting, you could see what they wore, and you could also see what they looked like. Well, in front of every single painting, there was a podium. And on this podium was a book. What the book was, it was about that person's lifetime. So if you're on the other side and you wanted to learn about what it was like in medieval Europe, You could go to this castle, see what the buildings, the structures looked like. You could go inside. You could look at the paintings, see what the people looked like. And then you could read about their lifetimes on these books. Well, right about then, I looked over to my right. You know how castles have those round staircases that come down? There
Hmm.
was a there was a woman who was walking down the staircase, and she had kind of strawberry blonde hair, and she was wearing kind of a peach colored gown. And she walked up to me and she spoke to me so she could see me, just like my guide did. And she said, "Is there anything I can help you find?" And I said to her the stupidest thing you could ever imagine. You know what I said to her? I
What?
said, "No thanks. I'm just looking." I could have,
the, the
as if
canned
I was,
response.
yeah, like I'm walking into a retail store looking for shoes. I could have asked this girl, "Where am I? Who are you? What's going on?" I was supposed to be having surgery, but I didn't know that I had died, so I didn't know anything. And my guide said that what this girl does is on the other side, her favorite thing is history. She loves history. And she loves the part of history that was what we would call medieval Europe. So you could come to this castle, and she was like a professor or a historian of that particular era of Earth's history. You could come here and ask her. That's why she came up to me and asked me, "Is there anything I can help you find?" Thinking that I was coming to ask her some information about that particular era of Earth's history. And I just love that. I wished I would have. I wish I could have known where I was. I could have asked her all kinds of stuff. But I think they must have done that on purpose because they would have known that I only had 7 minutes. I didn't have a long time to be experiencing all
Right.
of this. So here was the last part. This is how it ended. My guide took me to what I can only say was the most beautiful meadow that I have ever seen. Green grass, sprawling hills, flowers. It was a perfect day. No wind, just a beautiful summer day. And then my guide left. And I was standing there, I thought, by myself. Then I realized a man, a gentleman showed up in front of me, and I could see him. I could see his hands. I could see he had a white robe on. He had a golden sash around his waist, and he had gold colored sandals that laced up his calves. And I knew immediately that this was Jesus. This was the soul that we would know as Jesus during his lifetime. Well, he was a little bit different than the other people that I saw because coming out of his face, there was so much light and so much energy. It was like little flashes of lightning. There was so much light, I could not see his features. But he talked to me.
But you could see a face. You could see a face there, but it was
I could,
lit up.
yeah, it was like energy of light was coming out of it. There was so much
Whoa.
light that I couldn't see his features. I could only see his hands and his shoulders and the robe, but I couldn't, like, I wouldn't be able to draw him because I couldn't see his face. But he spoke
Wow.
to me and he said, "You must tell them there is no death." And then instantly, the very second he said that, I was back in the operating room. And that was my whole story.
I've heard so many near death experiences, and yours is just so detailed. What would you say to somebody that would say, "Hey, this is just a dream. You were just dreaming, bud"? How is this different from a dream for you?
I thought that same thing. And the first thing I would say is ordinarily, I never remember my dreams. I can't remember what I did yesterday. I think that's why God gave me the ability to remember every single detail so I could tell people. But I thought the same thing. It took me the better part of a day to realize that this wasn't a dream. And the only reason I knew that was because I told my mom. she came to the hospital with me, and she gave me a book, because back then there was no such thing as NDEs. It wasn't even talked about. The only book that was out was a book by Raymond Moody. I don't know if you've heard of him,
I
but
have, yes.
he had a book out. It was called Life After Life. And after I read that, then I realized, oh my gosh, what I had experienced, that was something real. Because never in my life had I ever experienced something that was as real as that was. And it never left me. It wasn't like a dream that fades away. It's never ever disappeared. I even thought, well, how do I know this wasn't some kind of a hallucination? And because I asked the doctor when I first opened my eyes, when he said to me, "You must tell them there is no death." I was back in the room. I opened up my eyes and I said to the surgeon, "What just happened?" Because I thought he would be able to tell me what all of this, what had just happened. Where was I? And he said, "We lost you." And I said, "Well, how long was I gone?" He said, "7 minutes." And that's when I realized that, okay, I actually died. And that's when I realized too that the other side doesn't have time like we do. The time is different, because it felt like my experience was an hour or two. That's what it felt like. I could not believe that it had only been 7 minutes. But they did all of that in a 7 minute period of Earth time.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's pretty
It is.
remarkable.
It really
Yeah.
is.
And I know that there's something like this, you really can't put words to it.
Yeah, as much as I try to tell people how extraordinarily, how beautiful it was, I can't even get close to what it feels like. Because on the other side, what is so incredible is that you can feel God. God is everywhere. And when you're on Earth in a lifetime, it feels like you're in a battle in a foxhole without a radio. You feel cut off. And I think for so many of us, we have that feeling in our solar plexus, in our stomach, that something's missing. There's just something that's gnawing at me that I've missed my whole life. And it's that feeling of God. And when you finish your lifetime and you go back to the other side, you have that feeling again. And it's like, that's what I've missed. Now I'm back home again. So I think a lot of us feel that through our whole lives.
It's true. And some of us are blessed and lucky to have these experiences to remind us.
Yes.
John, how has this impacted your life?
In every way. I think the biggest thing is that I no longer see life in terms of religion. In fact, I don't think that there really is religion even on the other side. I got the impression when I was standing there in front of Jesus, I got the very distinct impression that he would not tell people that there is only one way to God. I think it's more of a spirituality that religion is created by mankind to try to understand God. And that I think he would say that any religion that brings you closer to God is the right one for you. There is no one religion. God is too big for that. So I think that's been my biggest takeaway. And the other thing that I learned too, I think there are really two reasons why we're here. The first one is we come here to learn, to grow, to experience, because God hardwired all of us to want to learn. And he created this whole physical aspect of us for eternity, to have the ability to learn and to grow. And the second reason is that we come here to help others. And one of the things that I heard that I try to live my life this way is the Dalai Lama. He said something that I've never forgotten. He said, "Our prime purpose in this life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them." And
Mm.
that's what I think we're here to learn, and we're here to help others if we can.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Have your spirit guides kept in touch with you? Have you had any anomalous experiences since this happened?
You know what? I haven't. I can tell you one thing that did happen. I've never had any dreams or any experiences since my near death experience, except for when my wife's dad crossed. 8 years ago, my wife's dad crossed over, and 3 days later, he came to me in a dream. And this is the only thing that I've ever had happen that you would think would be of a paranormal nature. He comes to me in a dream, and in the dream, the setting is of a hotel. In the hotel, the metaphor is that when you come into Earth, it's like being in a hotel. You're only here for a short while until you go home again. So Earth is like being in a hotel. And he comes to me in the hotel and he says, everything is going to be all right. There are no accidents. Everything has a reason. Give it everything you've got. And please tell my family I'm okay. Because I woke up and I shook my wife up and I said, oh my gosh, I just had this dream about your dad. And she had me write down everything he said because I would have forgotten it. But since I wrote it down, I remembered what he said. And the most important part to me was when he said, give it everything you've got. Meaning when you're here on Earth, experience everything you can. Give it all of your attention. Give it all of your focus. Give it all of your work. Because what you learn is invaluable. And that's what you take with you. Because all the stuff that people think is important about, you've got to have so much money. You've got to have the perfect job. You've got to have the 20,000 square foot house, or you've got to take this vacation. All that stuff, that's just stuff. It doesn't mean anything. When you cross over, nobody on the other side is going to ask you, how much money did you make? They're going to ask you, who did you help? Did you make a difference with your life? It's almost like everything is backwards here. We think things matter that don't make any difference at all. So that's one of the things that I thought was so fascinating, was that they don't care how much success you have in life. It doesn't matter. What matters is, did you take that success and help others? Because that's what's important. That's the legacy. That's what the other side cares about.
Oh, that's perfect. What a beautiful message.
Yeah.
And on that note, do you have any final words for the audience?
Don't ever give up. There's a reason for everything. You're not alone. You have more support and more love than you can possibly know. And just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. But the other side is rooting for you more than you could ever know. So give it your best.
Where can people find you, John?
Yeah, anybody can reach out to me by email. I'm happy to talk to people anytime. My email is johnjdavis65@icloud.com. And I write back to everybody.
Perfect. John, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure.
Well, I'm doing my job. That's what they told me to do. So I love to do it. And David, thanks so much for letting me come on your show. I had a great time too. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means the world to me, and I will see you in the next video.